friends, I'm Morgan with Compass Rose Astrology. Today we're going to be talking about a kind of beginner's astrology 101 topic, as you can tell by the title of this video. This is going to be kind of a very brief intro into the topic of what is astrology. Maybe you don't know what astrology is, but you've kind of been curious about it recently, or maybe you don't know how to really explain it to your friends. And hopefully this video will give you a bit of a foundation to explain what exactly astrology is. We're going to be talking about kind of a very brief history of astrology. And then we're going to go into how you can actually use astrology in your everyday life and some resources that you can look into if you find this video useful or interesting. This is going to be kind of the first in like a series of astrological kind of teachings and background videos about what astrology is. So if you find this interesting, at all useful, feel free to like and subscribe, and I'd love to hear any of your comments about what your perspective on astrology is as well. So feel free to comment, and I'd love to talk with you guys. And with that said, let's talk about it. What is astrology? Is it a spirituality? Is it a religion? Is it a language? Is it a science? There's a lot of discussions on it out in the ether about what astrology is and how you can approach it. So let's dive in and see if we can unpack this ancient, centuries-old study. So what actually is astrology? What is the definition? So astrology is the study of the movements of the celestial spheres in the cosmos and the effects that this has on earthly activity. It is first and foremost a language. It's the language that is used to translate what the planets are doing in the heavens and how it affects us here in the modern world. And in this translation, we use symbolism, archetypes, events, and experiences to help us shape this translation to better impart the knowledge of divination. And it is a divination practice. It's used primarily to predict themes, effects, and experiences in our mundane, our daily life. So astrology isn't a science. It's not based on scientific data. Also not a spirituality or a religion. However, it does go hand in hand with belief systems and philosophies. But the actual belief system that you follow, it could be anything. There are Christian astrologers, there are pagan astrologers, there's, atheist astrologers probably. I don't know many, but I'm sure there are. And so the belief system that you have is not specific to astrology. Like you can follow whatever belief system you have and use astrology as a way to kind of boost your philosophical thinking and your perspective on the world. Astrology uses star charts, which are maps of the skies and the planetary positions of a moment that help navigate certain transits and predict the most likely outcome. And these charts contain 3 primary factors that allow you to make these predictions, and they're houses, planets, and signs. And it's an ancient study that's been around for millennia, but there are several approaches in the schools of study that you can follow that astrology that has been broken into. And there's medieval astrology, there's modern astrology, there's Vedic astrology, which is a huge study. It's a very popular astrological approach. There's horary astrology, which is horoscopes, kind of making predictions, asking questions. There's electional astrology, which is finding the best moment for something, to do something based on the planetary aspects in the sky at that moment. And then there's Chinese astrology, and there's several more as well. There's a lot of niches that you can get into that I won't go into too much detail now, but just as an example, those are some of the areas of study that you can get into. So just for the purposes of this YouTube channel and my blog, I will let you guys know that I study ancient astrology and I also incorporate some modern astrological approaches. I also use whole sign houses since they are accurate for me, and they've also been historically recorded as one of the most ancient house systems. And there are more than one house system, and that'll be a whole other video as well. Like I said, I also do include some modern astrological interpretations in my readings and in my studies as well. If you're anything like me, you might be wondering what the heck is the difference between modern and ancient astrology. And I honestly got into astrology once I learned that ancient astrology was a thing, because it has a lot more textual backup information to support the studies and the approaches, and so that's why I initially chose ancient astrology. Modern Western astrology it's sort of an amalgamation of information that's come together to represent psychological interpretations in astrology. Modern astrology is very much mostly a psychological interpretation. Yeah. So it was honestly a study that stemmed from kind of a lack of astrological texts, but they were based upon the teachings of people like Carl Jung and Freud, which is a lot of psychological, archetypal discussions and studies. So for the past 75 years, I would say, astrology was used primarily as a way to decipher the mind and the personality of the person, rather than divination. It didn't really focus on predicting anything or predicting the future or predicting events. It was mostly just to kind of psychologically discover the things that are going on within a person in a birth chart. So this was a consequence of the teachings of Ptolemy, who was an astronomer and astrologer in the 2nd century CE. He kind of stovepiped astrology into a rational frame of thought. And this was because during his time period, symbolic interpretive thought was beginning to be seen as frivolous and without value due to its lack of logic. And Ptolemy was attempting to legitimize astrology by making it rational, and so was modern astrology. And so this was all really valuable to keeping astrology kind of relevant and worth studying for the last 75 years, and including psychological interpretations is a really valuable way to kind of make your readings more robust when you start working in astrology. But the world is not black and white. It is not just a logical world. It's not just reason. And symbolism, interpretation, and language, these are all valuable concepts that fortify the mind, body, and spirit. They have value, whether or not they can be quantified. So incorporating both the symbolic side of astrology and the divination of astrology along with the psychological or more reason-based astrology, I think including those together is a really good path forward for astrologers as a whole. Astrology is often conflated with the pop astrology that you see in magazines, like the sun sign horoscopes. They're very fun, and that's honestly how I got started with astrology in my teens. But it's a great gateway into astrological interest for sure. But it's not a holistic look at astrology. It's like 80 words or less, for every week or month or something. It doesn't really get into the depth of astrology, and it's just a good snapshot of what astrology can be. And it's more efficiently used, astrology is more efficiently used to read birth charts from a rising sign perspective instead of the sun sign horoscopes of magazines. And so what is rising sign perspective? That would be from the exact moment of your birth in which what sign was present on the horizon when you were born in that exact moment. And this is also an ancient astrological teaching. It's how ancient astrology, 2,000 years ago, actually read birth charts and read astrological moments in the sky. And outside of birth chart readings, which kind of decipher the karma of your life at that period of time and what is going to follow you through the rest of your life, there's also several other areas of study within astrology. There is synastry astrology, there's which is relationship astrology. Like you would take two birth charts and you'd compare them and see what the commonalities and kind of decipher the relationship that these two people would have, these two natives. There's also medical astrology, there's fertility astrology, and there's, like I said, there's horary astrology, which basically is you are asking a question and you're looking for an answer in a snapshot of time. So you could ask, like, where's my last notebook? Or will this venture pan out? Questions like that. So why would you use astrology? And since astrology is a practice of divination, it's interwoven with several philosophical studies, namely Stoicism. Stoicism is the frame of thought in which you approach life with a balanced, kind of even nature. So all the good things and all the bad things that happen to you are approached with the same emotional attachment, which is none. So you basically say that there's equal value in the good things and the bad things that happen to you. Stoicism believes that you don't deserve anything good and you don't deserve anything bad. Life is just life. There are events that happen because of karma and you have to basically see it out. And the most peaceful and happiest way to get through life is to have no emotional attachment to things like the good and the bad. This is an appropriate philosophical study that goes hand in hand with astrology, because when you're using astrology, you're typically predicting the future, or you're seeing things that are going to come, seeing like themes or emotional reactions or events. And when you use astrology, there's a tendency to kind of have a bit of anxiety about the future. But using astrology with this stoic kind of perspective, it allows you to approach the future with grace and receptivity and appreciation for your life as a whole. So using astrology with this perspective allows you to live a more peaceful and happy life by knowing and accepting all the things that are happening. And you might be asking, how can you actually incorporate astrology into your day-to-day life? So first of all, I would suggest that you go ahead and you get your birth chart. So you can go to a website like cafeastrology.com or astro.com, type in your information. You have to have your birthday, your birthplace, and the actual time that you were born, down to the minute. So look at your birth certificate or something if you aren't sure what that is, and that should get you the information that you need, and you'll be able to see what your actual birth chart is. And then you can hold on to it, and the more you learn astrology, the more you can actually apply to your own birth chart and understand some of your own placements and some of your planets and houses and the aspects within that birth chart. And second, what I like to do and to incorporate astrology into my everyday life is I like to journal daily about the aspects and the movements of the moon. And this is a really good planet to kind of relate to, because it's the quickest moving planet and it's also the closest planet to Earth. So it's going, and it has physical effects on us through gravity, you know. It's not the moon, it's gravity, but still you can see and you can understand some of the movements when you actually pay attention to like which sign the moon is in. And when you journal, you can kind of focus on your thoughts and your feelings about, or even events about each day, because I think the moon transit each sign roughly every 2 days. So you can see if maybe your emotions are more heightened during a full moon, or with your birth chart in place, you can also see if maybe you have really vivid dreams when the moon is in your 12th house. So you can kind of incorporate stuff like that to help you better understand astrology and how it affects you on kind of a daily basis. And third, you can incorporate some more astrological learnings and education in your life. If any of this was very interesting to you and you want to look a little deeper into astrology as a whole and see which kind of study you want to get into, something like that, you can, I suggest getting a few different resources between books and podcasts and maybe other YouTube channels if you want. But primarily, I would say that you could start off with the Astrology podcast by Chris Brennan. That was honestly the first thing that I got into. I started listening to the podcast years ago, and there's a lot of things that kind of went over my head right at the very beginning, but the more you get into it, the more you can go back to older podcasts and re-listen. But he definitely, that's like a wonderful resource if you're looking for something like that. He also has a YouTube channel, so you can watch it instead of listen to it if you prefer that. And I also have 5 books that helped me the most in my initial studies of astrology. So let me grab those. So kind of going off the Chris Brennan theme, we're going to start off with Hellenistic Astrology, The Study of Fate and Fortune by Chris Brennan. So he's the guy that runs the astrology podcast. And this is a honkin' book, but it is full of so much valuable information. And it goes through the history of astrology as well as like different house sign systems, different aspects, triplicities, modalities. It goes through everything that you would need to have a really good foundation in astrology before you start doing readings or anything like that. Next, to kind of go hand in hand with that book, I also have Ancient Astrology, Volume 1 by Demetra George. This is an incredible book. This is also a textbook, and it has really similar kind of teachings as the Hellenistic Astrology book by Chris Brennan. However, Demetra George put like workshop examples in here for you to work out how actual birth chart deciphering works, and you use your own chart as an example, so make sure you get your birth chart before you get this book. And I think this is incredibly helpful. This really helped put a lot of stuff into perspective for me, because I think that a lot of astrology can't be taught in books. You know, you have to like actually work and do the practice and actually do readings, and that's just a really good way to kind of start off when you're still a beginner. Next, I have On the Heavenly Spheres. This is by Helena Avalar and Louis Ribeiro. I think that's how you pronounce it. But it's kind of a smaller book, thank God. And it also goes over really similar topics, but it kind of goes more in depth into a couple more topics that aren't covered in the textbooks by Brennan and George. And this also has a lot more like visuals, at least in my opinion, that kind of help put things into perspective again. And it's a really good kind of backup resource for learning aspects or honestly, it has a couple of other like smaller topics that get into more of the nitty-gritty of some aspects of astrology, and it helps kind of put those things into perspective as well. Next, I have Astrology and the Authentic Self by Demetra George. I love her books. I really like her voice. She really explains things in a great, clear way, and she also has just a really nice way of delivery. She has a very distinct voice, and I just really appreciate it. It makes me feel like I'm in like an actual classroom being taught by somebody. And I believe she actually did teach at Kepler College, so she is like a phenomenal resource for astrology. But basically, this book is about how to actually decipher birth charts. And it's not cookbook style, and you might hear that term a lot. So cookbook style is kind of as if like it's like I would say it'd be like an if then, like if the sun is in the first house, then you'll have someone that has a very magnetic personality, stuff like that. But it's not, and The important part of astrology is being able to interpret things on your own. You don't really want a cookbook style book to teach you because you need to be able to translate things on your own, and that is what this book is really good for. So I highly recommend that. And last but not least, the Bible for the astrologer. You need an ephemeris. This is basically a book that allows you to look up all the different transits and planetary aspects at certain points in time. So I have an American ephemeris, and this is from 1950 to 2050. I'll have to get another one in 2050, but this shows basically all the aspects and allows you to go back and look at progressions and stuff too if you're doing birth chart readings, which is super valuable. And it also just allows you to kind of get a better understanding of planetary placements, and it's basically the Bible. You need to be able to read an ephemeris if you're an astrologer. So I hope this video was at all illuminating or had some sort of information that you find valuable. I'd love to hear your perspective on maybe some of your favorite resources for astrology, any questions you might have, and I'd love to hear your comments. Please feel free to comment, and I will talk to you all soon. Thanks. Bye.